Hey, I'm Michael Dorinda,
And I'm Jake Bennett.
and welcome to episode 178 of the North Meets South Web Podcast.
Nailed it. Good job, dude. How's it going?
Going well. Going well. Busy,
Good.
but well. How about you?
Right. Yeah, no, same. I've tried recently. I catch myself saying the same answer that you just gave a lot, which is busy, right? And it's true. Like, it's not a lie. I mean, we are busy.
We're all busy.
But I realized after a while that I would ask people the same question and they would say the same thing. And it's like, you know what? We're all busy. All of us, we're all busy.
Yeah.
Like,
all busy all the time.
Yeah, I tried to stop saying that, but it doesn't work very well because it's still typically my answer. How are things going? Oh, yeah, pretty busy, but busy at work, but good. Things are good. Things are good. You know, whatever.
I mean, I don't know how else to answer the question
because
there's
so many things going on. It's like I have to pick one thing to talk about. It's like I could talk about a lot of things, but there's a lot of things going on, so I'm busy. There's a lot. You know.
Yeah.
We all are. We all
busy.
Are. You reach that certain stage in life where you think. I remember thinking when my kids were little, like, man, once my kids can feed themselves and tie their own shoes, then things will probably slow down. And it's like, then they get older and it's like, then it's friends and harder. Sports. And you're like, man, after basketball season is over, then things are going to slow down a little bit. And it doesn't. It just keeps going faster and faster and faster and faster.
We're just moving into that phase now with Eli playing sport and soccer. And now it's... Liv has decided that she doesn't always want to. I think more often than not, she doesn't want to go to the soccer games, which is fair enough because it's cold and she's sitting around and she's bored and she's not really interested in it. So because she's not participating, she doesn't really want to be involved. And so one week I'll take Eli to soccer, one week Rhea will take him. And so
nice.
It's the back and forth and then like figuring out who's going where. And now that the kids are a little bit more independent and it's a bit easier to do things like before, when we like bath the kids, we want all hands on deck because someone will be washing one, someone will be drying the other one, getting them ready for bed and all that kind of stuff. Now, both of them can basically wash themselves except when it comes time to washing their hair, and Eli can dress himself. So it's like we just watch them get in and out to make sure that they don't slip on the bath. You know, so that makes it easier to like go out during the week so that, you know, mum can put one of them to bed or I can put one of them to bed, feed them, all that kind of stuff. And it's not like this overwhelming chore of having to do all of that stuff because they're quite independent already. And so that makes life a lot easier so that we don't have to have two people here all the time. It makes it easier for Rhea to go to the gym or for me to go out and grab a bite or something like that. So
yeah, very true.
It's just it's a different kind of busy, as you say. It is different. You know,
that's right.
It's just phases of busy, and then you know, once they get to the age of your kids, at the other end, it's like more professional sport kind of commitments. Not professional, but like higher level of sporting commitments where it's training multiple times a week, it's playing multiple times a week, it's all of this kind of moving around.
Right.
Where
we're trying to get better. Like when they're younger, it's like they're just trying to play. They're happy to just play, and like at this level. They have to kind of decide if they want to if this is what they want to do, or if they don't. And if they do, it's like they've got to commit to practicing outside of the practices and games and stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's like if you actually want to get playing time and be good, you got to do stuff outside. So coordinating those times as well and whatever. So it's all lots of fun, man. It is all lots of fun. But it does for Graham right now, he's 14, so it feels like the clock is starting. The countdown is on. You know what I mean?
The countdown to college, because it's very different for
as much time
you
as
guys
we can
over
with
there.
him. Yeah.
Because once over there, very, very common for, you know, kids to pack up and go off to college and not stay at home and be away for months at a time between breaks and things like that. Whereas here, they generally, people will still go to university where they grew up. And it's like you'll catch a bus to the city to like go and then you'll come back home at the end of the day. So it's very different. You know, hearing those perspectives. I see Abigail, you know, tweeting about it, that they're running out of summers with the kids at home and the kids being around and all that kind of stuff. And it's just not something that really crosses out my mind because short of going to join the army, you know, like my nephew did, you don't really, like most people kind of tend to stay where they are until they finish study. Not a lot of people will travel interstate for study. I think that's fairly uncommon here.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
Whereas
that is a
that's like
cultural thing.
par for the
I
course
think
for you guys.
very, very common. Yeah, exactly.
Mm,
And a lot of kids see it as their first opportunity to sort of escape their hometown. You know what I mean? It's like they want to get out of
mhm.
here. They want to go experience the world, live somewhere different, live apart from their parents and family, kind of have their leap into adulthood, if you will. So,
Yeah.
which comes with the pros and cons, because they're only 18, so they're still kids, man.
Yeah.
And it's like you
Yeah.
can make really stupid decisions as 18-year-olds. You can make really stupid decisions as a 40-year-old too, but
Yeah.
you got a little bit more life experience behind you. So, anyway, yeah, it's fun, man. It's been a good start to the summer, and things are going good. Um, Last show when we were talking, we came up with like a bunch of things that we wanted to talk about. And so I wrote them down and we talked about how we wanted to sort of have a little bit more, what did you call it? Like not consistency, but like
Continuity.
continuity. That's it. That's the
Yeah.
word. Continuity between the shows. And so last time we were talking about Wistia, talked about the new Wilbur Jobs website and how
Mhm.
that was pretty cool. I've got a couple things we could talk about with that. Staggered CSS animations, live photos. We could talk about that. Or we could talk about where to store values for templates and static sites. That's an interesting one.
Mhm.
Or defensive programming or time-bombed feature flags. All right, which one sounds the most interesting to you?
Time bomb feature flags I've played with in the past, and they've bitten me because
Yes.
they don't work
Ooh.
quite the way that I thought they would.
All right, let's dive in. Let's dive into time bomb feature flags. Okay. Should I set the stage real quick? You want to tell me
Mhm.
what Pennant is? Tell all the people what Pennant is.
Pennant is a Laravel first party implementation for feature flagging in your Laravel apps, right? So Tim
Yeah.
McDonald built that one out. Not last year, the year before, I think. So it's a couple of years.
Yeah.
It's been around now, and yeah, it's a first party. It feels like a Laravel implementation of feature flags.
Yeah, it's a really good library and it's very simple. So it's basically the minimum amount of code that you would need in order to be able to run feature flags is kind of how I think of it. So it's really wonderfully simple. The couple things the way that we use it is you can either have a closure that helps to give it a name. You can name the feature and then have a function that accepts a scope and then resolves the truthiness of that feature. So you say, let's say the feature is, I don't know, can call Michael. It's can call Michael. One of our support people gets an emergency button on their dashboard, which if they need help, they can call Michael. And only certain people get access to this because, there's people who have abused this in the past. And so we want to start out with only giving it to managers because managers are the ones who can escalate calls to Michael. So what we're going to do is we're going to name this feature can call Michael. And the way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to implement it inside of a class called can call Michael feature. And inside of that, I have a resolve resolve method, which accepts a scope. And I think typically that's just a generic, it's mixed $ scope, but you can specify things like user. So I know that I'm passing a user into that scope and it will fail if I pass anything else. So I'll pass a user in as that scope. And then I can say user has role manager, something like that. And I return the truthiness of that statement. So if that statement returns as true, when that person visits the page that checks that feature, right, where that feature is actually on the page, it will grab that class, it will resolve that feature, resolve that method, and then return a truthy or falsy value. And then that will get stored depending on what driver you're using for Pennant. It'll either get stored in the database or it'll get stored, in Redis or other places, wherever you might have it. And then at that point, it is resolved. It is now stored. It will not ever resolve again unless you delete or purge that feature for that person, which is great. So that's the idea, right? I can turn features on or off. I can also launch it as like nobody gets it. I can just from that resolve function return false. And then I can go into the database and I can say only I get it, right? Or I can release it to a beta group of users. So I can test it in production without having any fear of breakages occurring because nobody can see it except for me. So if it breaks, it's only going to break for me or it's going to break for a very small group of users. So really, really nice. Now, after having explained that, Michael, I want to hear your idea or explanation of time bombs, why you might use them, and how you implemented them and how they bit you.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think it's the fact that they are resolved once and persisted that has bitten me, because the time bomb nature is that I would expect that a feature flag applies or doesn't apply depending on how you've got your code wrapped by that feature flag at some point in the future. So the way that I wanted to use them, rightly or wrongly, last year when I looked at it, was to time bomb the display of speakers for Laracon AU. So like on some date in the future, we want this speaker to appear on the website. So I don't have to remember to do it. So I don't have to be at the computer to, tick a box or whatever. So I thought, yes, I will time bomb that feature flag so that that speaker appears at some point in the future. Now, the problem with that was because it was resolved once, when it resolved the first time that it was loaded,
it was false.
It was false. So it went into the database and that was it. It was just false forever. So I would have to then go in on that time, on that day, to then remove that flag, which kind of defeated the purpose of
Defeats
it. So
the purpose. Totally.
That's where I got bitten by them. Other than that, I think they were fantastic.
Okay, so it's probably helpful to talk about definitions of what a time bomb is. So what you've explained there is not necessarily a time bomb. A time bomb, as Martin Fowler describes it when he's talking about features and toggling, is a way for you to make sure that feature flags don't stick around for forever, right? So you could think of a time bomb more as an expiration date than only to show it at this time. Now, I think it's worth discussing how we would actually approach your particular problem that you're talking about. And maybe, I don't know. I'm actually not sure how I would solve that with Pennant. I think I would honestly, in that instance, I would literally just put a timestamp check or something like that.
Right.
I would wrap it with a conditional if that says, if now is past, and then pass in the date. And then that's how I would do that probably.
Yeah, this year we put all of the speakers into the database, so now we just have a published at is in the past. So that works fine this time. Yeah, which is the sensible way of doing it. But last year we kind of it was all static HTML really, so we'd put all all the speakers on the page that way, and so we were just expecting for each one to then to appear effectively when the time was in the past, but didn't work out that way. But this year, it's just a field on the database that's announced at or something like that, and we just return all of the speakers where announced at is less than or equal to now, which
that
is
makes sense.
A much easier way of doing it.
Great way
Don't use
to do
feature
that.
flags for that. Yeah, no,
absolutely, great way to do that. So, so if we're approaching this idea of time bombs as more of an expiration date, I would love to talk about that just for a little bit. And essentially, I'll give you this scenario that we faced that had me looking back into this, which was we had a feature flag that was, gating a feature that we had written. And I pushed it out on a Friday and promptly forgot about that feature.
Best time to push it out, for sure.
Totally forgot about it. It didn't matter. It was like, okay, hey, whatever. So I enabled it for a couple of users, and the users of us who had it just looked at it and figured, well, everybody must have this, right? We totally forgot that we did not release it for everyone.
Yeah.
And so 6 months later, somebody's like, yeah, I don't know how to see if this file is timed up or not. We're like, well, just use the timed up, thing at the top.
Yeah.
They're like, I've never seen that. And we're like, certainly, it's right up here. Here's where you should see it. Go into the features table. Yep. Not enabled for anybody except for us. Crap. And so what happened is we had this feature flag that was not supposed to be around forever. It was only supposed to be for this beta testing sort of idea. And once it was good, then we needed to remove it. So the question is, how do you inform yourself when you should, how do you basically put an expiration date in and say, hey, by the time a month has passed, we should have figured out if we want this feature or not for everybody. It should be general release to everybody, or it shouldn't be. And, we kind of need to pull the trigger on one way or the other. So I asked Tim McDonald, I was like, how would you do this? We had a couple ideas for how we would do it, but the way that he did it was very clever. And so I wanted to share the idea that he had, which is to put on each one of your feature classes, which again is the way that I really prefer to do it, is to use a class-based resolution, because you get other things that you can do, this behavior, these traits that you can put on it and whatnot. But you make a trait called is like concerned with expiration, maybe something like that. And inside of there, you have a contract essentially, or sorry, maybe it's a contract, not a trait, but it's a contract that specifies that you need to have a is expired method that returns a Boolean. And then what you can do is that in that is expired, you can do a date. You can say now is past a particular time, or you can do other things, right? There's other things you could do. It doesn't have to just be a date, but you just return a Boolean from there. And then what you can do is you can, in your service provider, you can say there's an event that says feature resolved, I think is what it is. And so what this does is anytime that a feature gets resolved, even if it's out of the database, if it's grabbing it, it will look and say, is this an instance of, or does this extend a contract or implement a contract of, can expire or something, whatever. Like what, I'm using bad names here, but that's the idea,
Sure.
right? And if it does extend that contract or implement that contract, then what you do is you check to see, is it expired? And if it is expired, then you can do a couple things. So, you could warn yourself, something like that. But the thing that Tim did, which I thought was really cool, is there's this way that you can check to see if you're running tests currently. Have you ever seen this before? So it's
on
like
the container, there's running unit tests or something like that.
Yeah. If app.op running unit tests. So you can do this conditional. You should say, if we're running tests and it's expired, then we want to throw a runtime exception that says feature has expired. So what that does then is if you're ever running a test that encounters this feature and the feature is expired, it's going to force you to make a decision one way or the other. You either need to extend the amount of time that you have until it expires or get rid of it. And I love that because it's not destructive. It doesn't ever mess you up in production. You can have it log if it's in production if you want, instead of throwing that runtime exception. But it's a great way to ensure that any of your features that you're putting in place have a reasonable expiration timestamp on them, and that you're forced to deal with them at some point in the future. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah,
that is a very Tim thing to do. To put a thing in there. So he did. So here's the deal. He hasn't actually, like, this does not exist. You have to just add it on yourself. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I was like, it would be cool if it was first party. And he's like, I mean, I didn't feel like there was a good generic option to put on top of it. So I built the tools, allow the users to decide how they want to handle it, but it's not difficult to implement it, right? You could see how you would do so.
It demonstrates a lot of restraint on his part and I suppose on Laravel's part in general about where you draw the line in the sand for what you do offer as part of the library, and for what you say the tools are there, go and implement it. And I think this is a fairly good use case of the tools are there, go and implement it yourself. I've gone back and forth over the years about whether or not using those kind of conditionals in application code is a good idea or a bad idea. Doing an environment check, or doing are we running unit tests or that kind of stuff to then trigger things, because you're putting test logic inside of your application code to do this kind of stuff. I think is fine in general. I don't really see any reason to do that. I know that in parallel testing and things like that, we will have all kinds of conditionals that check, like if the parallel testing token is set, that we need to go and do this stuff, and then somewhere else we go, okay, don't do this stuff because we are parallel testing and things like that. So there's definitely cases, I think, where doing that kind of runtime testing time logic is good. I think forcing you to, blow up it depends on how strict you are on your continuous integration. Like if you're running this in CI and it fails because somewhere between where you push to pull request into GitHub and
Mhm.
and when the CI ran, your test suite is now failing because of this expired token or this expired check, but it's unrelated to the pull request that was pushed up. So I think that's like that's the one thing that sticks to me. So okay, yes, we need to do something about it. It is now impacting on this unrelated thing. And it's, a team decision. What do you do with that? Is someone now tasked with going immediately and updating that? Do we, it may not be a decision that gets resolved straight away, depending on the size of the organization. It might be like you as a developer or as a founder, you can go like, yeah, I'll just kick that can down the road a week, or I'll go and remove all of those feature flags, and this is now just a feature that's part of the platform. So yes, it does prompt you to do that, but sometimes that decision involves committees. It involves
Yeah.
product teams, product managers, things like that. You've got to go ask, you've got to go wait. They don't have an answer. They've got to go chase it up with someone else.
So now you have a blocked PR. Yeah.
And meanwhile, you've got a block PR and a failing test suite and all of that kind of stuff. So,
In fact, every PR is blocked, right? If you had multiple PRs out there, all of them are blocked, and every single person is trying to scramble to figure out what do we need to do with this.
Yeah. And everyone's coming, oh, this is failing, retry failed tests, like, because they're like, oh, this wasn't supposed to fail, especially like we get into situations at work where the test suite will just be flaky. And it's just over time, the construct of the application has changed where, you've got factories that are resolved in a certain way, which is okay when you've got 100 tests, but when you've got 500 tests or 1,000 tests, those factories can like step on each other. You might not have something that's unique. So over enough iterations, you end up with collisions and things because you don't have the like faker unique applied in there. So there's like all these different cascading arbitrary failures that you might not even look at it for a couple of days until someone goes, hey, this is failing. So I like the idea in theory. I think whether or not it works depends on the kind of company that you're in and how quickly they respond to that. Like whether you put that in there at all, it really comes down to how quickly someone is going to respond when it may be a case that you log for 2 weeks or something before the failure, even if you are running in tests, so that something bubbles up somewhere that hopefully someone would see. But yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying that. Like, I think in general, I agree with the idea. I like the idea of putting something that explodes in tests, because that's something that at some point in your release cycle, whether it's during development locally or as part of CI or deployment, it's like something will blow up because of that.
Yeah.
And what you have in place to work around it, okay, we can just merge this PR anyway, knowing that this is unrelated to that pull request. Yeah. If you do automated deploys, it's a bit trickier. It depends on, like, if you do, I know with Laravel's testing stuff, you can dash bail on your test, and like it will after the first fail, like if that's the first failure and it doesn't get to something else. Yeah, okay, so this is unrelated to my failure. I'm going to, ship this anyway. Oh, whoops, there was some error further down in the test suite that didn't get picked up because we bailed out on this thing. So,
I'll say that the concerns that you bring up are the very same concerns that Andy Hinkle had when we were going to implement this. He was like, I don't like the fact that other developers are going to have to deal with a feature flag before they can merge their stuff. So we came up with some ideas and some solutions. The one thing I will say too, though, is that this, I feel like, follows the convention that has been brought about in many different, like we talked about Nuno's thing where it's like, just here's the best practices applied to the app service provider, where it's like disallow N+1 queries, or disallow lazy loading, or those assignment overflow things, or whatever, like those sorts of things that only fail if you're in your local environment. You know what I'm talking about? It'll check those things. It's not going to blow up in production. It's not going to blow up in your face. If you happen to ship it to production, it's going to be like, okay, just let it go. But if you're in local dev or in testing, it's going to blow up in your face and say like, yeah, you can't do that. You can't, do that lazy load stuff. So this sort of falls in line with that to me. However, it's not a yes or a no or an always or a never. It's only based on some time based thing a lot of times, which is, so it's not a right or wrong. It's just like if you happen to be the guy who runs it just before it expires or right after it expires, then you're screwed. You're the one who has to deal with it. So okay, so how do we address this? Well, two different ways I think we could deal with it. One is that you could, if you're running your CI on a regular enough basis, you could start dropping warnings a month in advance of the expiration, right? So you could say, if it expires in the next 30 days, throw a warning on the tests. If it expires in the next, if it's in the past, then go ahead and throw a failure, something like that. So that would allow you to be notified of it ahead of it actually expiring so that you could fix it. And you see it, it's erroring or not erroring, but it's throwing a warning, and you're like, oh, okay, I should probably make an issue for that so somebody can fix that or make a decision. We have 30 days to do so. The other thing that we talked about is making a command that runs once a day at like 6 a.m., something like that runs through the features, checks if any of them are expired, and if they are, sends off an email or creates an issue or whatever you might have that says, hey, by the way, these features are expiring within the next 30 days or in the next 7 days or whatever, or they are expired and these need to be addressed, and that's it. So there was a couple options there. You could say it doesn't ever fail tests. It just sends out a warning to let somebody know that this needs to be addressed. So there's a couple different ways you could do that there that I could see being effective that would not necessarily block the team, but could inform a project manager that these are something that we need to prioritize within the next cycle.
Kind of, deprecation warnings, I guess, for
Yes,
features.
exactly that.
Mm.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Yeah. And I think realistically that's the only way to deal with it. And if no one's going to pick up the deprecation warnings for the feature flags like that on across the team, across an organization, if you're involving all these different people, then probably have bigger concerns to worry about. At least sending that email or that notification into Slack or whatever else that happens to be from that scheduled task is, you've got to address it in some way. And if it goes to enough people, if it goes to too many people, everyone's going to be like, I thought someone else was going to deal with it. And then you've got to be careful there as well. So yeah, keep the list small, but make sure it gets actioned, I guess, is the main thing.
Exactly.
But again, comes down to the team and like someone actually taking ownership over that. So yeah.
Yep.
Good,
Yep,
good problem. I think good solution to that problem as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. It was a fun one to kind of run down, and it was a couple different approaches there, a couple different concerns, but I was happy with where we landed on it. So yeah, stoked about that. Okay, since you talked about your speakers on Laracon, I think this is a good transition into this other part, which is this: where do you store values for templates in a static view? Okay, so let me pitch it to you this way. Let's say you didn't have a database for those team members, or not the team members, for those speakers, right? Because locally you are going to do it, and you don't want to have to, like, how do you populate your database locally and then push that up to production without having to have access to the production database? You can't really do that. It's like, I know what the values need to be. They're not necessarily dynamic. It's just, I don't, where do I store them, right? What are my options? If I can't put them in a database, where are the other places that I could put them? So I actually came up with one just as we're talking here, but there was a couple options here that were thought about, right? One is you could literally just like create a component, and then in Blade, you don't even bother doing a loop. You just put in the values, right? That's it. Create a component, put the values in. That is your database, essentially, right? You just write them all out in the Blade, and that works. That's fine. Like, you just basically, your component is going to have locations or values, like the values that you would normally store in the database are going to be essentially like arguments to that component, right? So like name, image source, title, announcement date, right? All those things, right? Those are going to be stored like in the Blade file. That's one way to put it. That's one spot to put it. Can you think of any other spots you might put these things?
I can, because this is what we did last year.
Oh, okay. I want to hear. I want to
Was
hear. I want wrong answers
we
only. Wrong
Wrong
answers
answers
only.
only. Yeah.
Yes.
What we
Where are the
did
other
was
places you could put it?
we created a YAML file that we hosted in GitHub that you had to in a
Okay.
gist. That was a secret gist. No, I'm joking.
I was gonna
We,
say, oh dang, you okay?
you said
That's
wrong answers
crazy.
only. You said
I
wrong
did.
answers only.
At first, I thought you were being serious. I was like, wait a second, really? Okay, all right. A YAML file and a gist that you were pulling in. All right, fair enough.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to
And
go
then you
and,
used sushi.
scan
You used
sushi,
Caleb
yeah,
Porzio's
to use
sushi
it
package. Right?
as an eloquent database. That's right. No,
Yeah.
I just put all that stuff inside of like a config laracon.php, and there was
Okay.
just an array of speakers, which was keyed by. Actually, I don't think it was keyed. I think it was just an array that we then pulled out, and we collected it, put it in a collection. We sorted it by announced. We filtered ones that were not, didn't have an announced in the past, and that was it. That's how we did it.
Yeah.
And then I think we just use Cloudflare to cache that. So obviously the page gets cached, so it doesn't have to hit the origin server to resolve that in the future. So yeah, that was it really.
No, that works pretty good. So like you could put it in the config. You also, if you're being a little bit crazy, you could just chuck it into the controller. Like if you wanted to just inline an array in the controller, you could kind of put it in there. That's one way to do it as well. So my junior-ish developer, he's Landon is his name. He played basketball a little bit last year at LaraCon with me right afterwards. There's a couple dudes that we all played, me, David, Hemphill, Landon, and then 3 other dudes that absolutely smoked us. It was really fun, but kind of crazy. Landon's a great basketball player, junior developer though, and he's figuring stuff out. And so for him, he initially just put it like in the controller. Like he actually had a method for each, like, so we had like 4 locations that we were trying to deal with. And so what he did is he put a method in the controller. So we'd have like a value being passed to the controller, in the array that gets passed in to the view. View. And he would say like location 1, fat arrow, this get location 1, and it's a location 2. This fat arrow get location 2. So here's just calling private methods inside the controller that were sort of then returning these arrays. And I was like, that is fine. Like it works. It's probably not how I would do it, but it works. And so I was like, I'm wondering, config file was the first thing that came to mind. But for some reason, I remember when looking at it, there were some reasons why it wouldn't have really worked in a config file. And I think partly because he was doing some PHP stuff inside of that config file. And like, it would have been weird to do it there. But the other thing that I'm wondering here is this. If you didn't want to store it in the config, what if you just put it in the SQLite database and then shipped the database up? Yeah. If you put that in somewhere, like, could you, where would you put that though? You'd put it in the storage file or something? I don't know how that typically works. If you put it in the storage, you have to like symlink it or something weird like that if you're using Envoy or.
I would just put it in the database, because that's where the SQLite files go by default. If if you do a Laravel new and you say you want to use SQLite, it will create a database/database.sqlite file inside of storage, inside of the database folder, and then you just commit that to version control and off you go.
Because I'm sure initially it's probably get ignored, maybe.
Maybe database.sqlite specifically, but you could just remove it from there. Like
totally,
just because Laravel puts it there by default doesn't mean you can't change it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Shipping SQLite is fine. Who was it? Like, was it Aaron Francis was talking about that for I think for his aaronfrancis.com. He ships an SQLite file or something like that. So
it seems like the right place to do it, right? I mean, like you literally have the structure in there. You can pull it using your using models and all that good stuff. So it's like I don't really see a reason why you wouldn't or why you couldn't.
Is made to be small and portable like that. These things,
practically is a config file. It's just a flat file.
Android file. Yeah, it's just shove it all in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing you could probably do is like a document store, something that writes JSON to a file and do that.
Yeah, but the SQLite thing seems way better to me. Yeah, as long as you have, as long as you can set up, you just have to make sure that each person that's looking at it, when they're doing the develop stuff, that they map they can open table plus to that SQLite file or whatever, right? So yeah, that seems like a good way to do it though. It seems like a pretty good way to do it. Portable, light. It's still a queryable entity. You don't have
You
to
could
write.
be,
You don't have to write like factories or anything for it. You could just, you just ship it. You ship the
yeah,
actual data
yeah.
up.
You
Yeah,
could open up Table Plus and use that as your, you know,
totally.
as your
Yeah,
admin interface to put stuff in there. I mean, the only
absolutely.
other
And you've
thing
got version
that
control on it and everything.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the only other thing that you might do that's probably a little bit more approachable in terms of version control is just like a CSV file, and then use
Yeah,
Sushi to manage that.
yeah. But I like
Because
the
then,
SQLite. I like the SQLite
yeah,
option.
yeah,
I might push
ISQLite's
in that
definitely
direction.
nicer from a dev perspective. If you needed like someone else, someone from product or someone from sales or marketing, whatever, to be putting data in their CSV would be fine. They're just like, here's the updated file,
Yeah, yeah.
drop it in, overwrite, replace it.
Yeah, it's only developers working on this one, so I think
Mm.
SQLite's going to be the solution there, and I think that's a really great way to do that. So we're going to move towards that. Actually, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to end up doing that precisely. Love it, love it. Awesome. Okay, what else we have here? Live photos, staggered CSS animation, defensive programming. What do you think?
Saw Matthias, I can't say his last name, starts with a G, Guimaraes, I think. He's got a defensive Laravel course coming to Laracast at some point
I saw
soon, which would be
Jeffrey
cool.
tweeted about that like today, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely check that out if you're a Laracast subscriber. I watched his, it was event sourcing series that he had on
Nice.
Screencast. That was really good. He did a good job of that. So I'm keen to see his defensive Laravel stuff, because he works at like a payment provider or something over there where he lives in pretty sure Brazil, one of the Portuguese / and or Spanish speaking nations. Sorry, Mateus, but
it's Portuguese, right? Yeah. I told you about that, right? When I said I thought,
but I couldn't remember if he
sorry.
was from Spain or from Brazil. But I know in Brazil they speak Portuguese. Yeah. So,
yes, indeed.
Yeah, he does some very intense things in terms of like the extremes of what you can do with Laravel. So I can't, you'd be hard pressed to find a better teacher for that kind of Laravel at scale type of thing. So yeah, keen to check that one out when it drops.
That'll be really good. I'm sure he'll have some excellent sort of tips on using Laravel tools in order to be sure that you can catch things if they happen to go terribly wrong. We had something today where it was the sequence in which something was working. So we were reading an email from an email inbox. We were creating a record for it. And on that database, we had a unique column for the ID of that item from that inbox. So that item from that inbox was given a unique like Outlook message ID. And so it's a GUID. And so it's unique. You cannot create another one with that same GUID. However, the step after we created it was to move it from that location, that folder, to another location. If that failed, right, so you'd move it from the inbox to a folder called processing or something like that, right? So we create the record and then we start to process that email. We read the body, we read the subject, we do some, guessing as to where we think it needs to go, and basically have our own really intelligent rule system that we can build up off of that database record, right? So you create the record and then you send it to processing. Well, if that sending to processing fails for some reason, which sometimes is this weird race condition, if it fails, then the email doesn't move. And when the inbox gets scanned in the next minute, it tries to pick that up again and create the record. Well, since you have a unique ID, it fails. So yeah, it's like just using simple things like a database transaction around those two pieces, right? Create it and then move it. And if it fails while moving, roll back the creation so that it can try it again next time without hitting a unique constraint. So those are the sorts of things that we're talking about here, right? You can't anticipate everything that's going to happen. You don't know all the different failure points, but you can certainly wrap something in the database transaction and roll back if something fails. You can do that. And you don't have to know everything. You just have to know if anything fails in here, roll back. Don't leave this unfinished, weird state that you're going to have to contend with later, especially if you have constraints around unique values. So I hope in his course, he covers some of those things, or, like the rescue function in Laravel is so insanely awesome, where if there is a failure while you're attempting to do something, you can provide a default return value and just continue the program running as if nothing failed, right? That's incredibly helpful. So Laravel has a ton of tools to help make it more resilient and more bulletproof if you know they exist. So I'm sure he'll cover all of that stuff and do a great job doing so.
Yeah. One thing I've been caught out with by that rescue helper in the past is typically I'm wrapping something in rescue because I don't want to know about it. And I always, I have on more than one occasion forgotten to set the report flag to false. So I still get the exception bubble up, and then I go like, what is this? And then I put the rescue in there and I go, I forgot to report, because the place that we mainly use it is when we are trying to parse dates using Carbon or the date facade, because you guys use month, day, year, and we use day, month, year. But
yes, right.
if you take something that's day / month / year and you throw that at date parse, because that's how we would enter it into a UI.
Yeah.
When you take day / month / year and put it into PHP assumes that it is month / day / year.
Yeah.
And so what you end up with is something that's like 13 / 3 / 25, and then Carbon goes bang.
Freaks out.
So yeah, we've got in a number of places where we're handling that, a date create from format, and then we explicitly tell it like this is day / month / year, so that it goes, all right, yeah, this is the right way around. And then we fall back to just doing like a date pass in case something comes through as year - month - day or whatever else, and then gets picked up that way. But yeah, when it hits that first rescue callable and you don't have the report, then we still get the exception bubble up into our observability tooling, and it's like, oh, yep, I don't really care about that, because it's like it will catch the exception from the rescue, report it, and then go to the fallback. So you're like,
continue on.
And then you go, but this worked. Why am I? Oh, okay. Yep. Gotcha. So don't miss that one.
I'm surprised that there's no like localization thing for Carbon where you can basically just tell it at the top level, hey, we're in Australia, please handle dates accordingly.
Yeah. Probably is, and we just miss it. But
maybe.
But this is an underlying PHP thing as well. Like if you were to do like a create whatever the underlying PHP function is, it will do the same thing.
Got it.
The correct approach for that is to use hyphens instead of slashes.
But interesting.
No one here is going to enter the dates with hyphens instead of slashes, because that's just not what we do. So like that is. I mean,
we don't do hyphens either.
Yeah, I assume that's like the workaround at the language level, to be like, oh yeah, you can do this as but you're not going to tell users of your platform who have become accustomed to using slashes to use hyphens in your application where everywhere else is just handled. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, hey dude, I think we have a couple things left to talk about next time. We could probably talk a little bit more about defensive programming and some examples that we have. We could talk about staggered CSS animations, which is interesting to me. This is when you go onto a page and you want like this effect of when you hit a certain observability point and there's a, what's that called? Interaction observer. It will animate something into view. But if you have like 3 paragraphs of text or something like that right following each other, and you scroll down really fast, you don't want that whole block to animate in at the same time. You want them to animate in like a PowerPoint, like 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Which is a little bit tricky to do. And so I think motion.dev allows you to do that. We figured out how to do that. I still have to implement it. And then this idea of how do we accomplish live photos on the web, where if you roll over something, it kind of moves the photo. It kind of gives you this motion where it changes from a photo to a video while you're rolled over it, and then when you roll off it, it stops doing that. So found some interesting stuff about that. I'd love to kind of talk that through with you and see what your thoughts are on that. So next show, folks, come on back. Hey, to go along with the news of Steve and Aaron breaking up, I got to let you guys know that Michael said he's leaving the podcast and he's just leaving it to me. He said he's giving me everything. Just take it. I'm paying him 50% of what it's worth. So
50% nothing is nothing.
Yeah.
Since
we haven't had a sponsor in like years, I'm getting a steal on this thing.
That's right. I said to Aaron that the unsponsorable comment was ruthless. It was fair, but it was ruthless.
Oh, so funny. So funny. Oh my.
He'll be fine.
Well,
anyway, I think he's well set.
I agree. No, totally. He'll do great, and I think Steve will do well too. I mean, I think people knowing that he's available. I mean, heck, when I heard that he was available, I'm like, oh, geez, I have a couple things I can have him do. Actually, one specific thing that I thought of that I was like, I would love for Steve to do this, but I knew he wouldn't have time. Yeah. So maybe now he does.
Maybe get into it, because I said how long before he lands on the Lara ship. So get in before it's too late.
Who knows? Maybe that was part of his calculation. Maybe he was like, you know what? I can have a job over here if I really wanted one. So maybe I'll just do the job thing for a bit. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm not making any assumptions here. Hey, folks, also, if you have not bought your Laracon tickets yet, it might be too late. But if it's not, you should definitely go buy them, because Michael and I would love to see you there. We're going to be doing some interviews there. We're going to be enjoying the show, watching all the talks, and we would love for you to say hi. So please stop by and say hey. Look for the really tall guy, and look for the handsome Australian with the other cursing Australian next to him. That will be Aaron. OG Aaron.
OG Aaron.
OG Aaron making an appearance again at Laracon US. He's going to be a riot. I can't wait to see him.
Good fun.
It's going to be good fun.
Awesome.
Episode 178, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can find show notes at northmeetsouth.audio/178. Hit us up on X or on Blue Sky at Jacob Bennett, at Michael Dorendo, or at North South Audio. And if you liked the show, rate it up in your podcatcher of choice. 5 stars would be amazing. Thanks, folks. If you'd like to sponsor us, also talk to us on those channels. It won't happen. Yep. But if you'd like to, we'd love for you to. But until next time, we'll see you.
Oh.